What's up, friends? Welcome to another episode of the Ableton Music Producer Podcast. I feel like I owe everybody an apology, first of all, because it has been far too long since I've released another podcast episode. It's been crazy busy, been spending a lot of time working with my band Philia, doing live performances and things of that nature. I actually have been considering bringing on one of my friends who has helped with the technical setup as far as doing lighting and visuals in tandem with Ableton Live for our live setup. It's pretty fun. We've got all of our visuals and everything synced to another program called Resampling. So stay tuned. Look out for an upcoming episode about live performance. I think I may bring my friend Ben on to an episode as a guest, and we can just nerd out and walk you through step by step our live performance with my band Philia. I think that would be a cool episode. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys want to stay connected or send me a message and let me know what you think for future episodes, you can connect with me at Live Producers Online on Instagram or on Facebook. I've been more into the Instagram lately. If you guys want to connect with me, just go to @Live Producers Online, and I'll be sharing more tips and tricks. And you can send me a DM and be like, "Yo, Dan, this would be a cool episode idea," and would love to stay connected with you there. But today's podcast episode is going to be a little bit different than the norm. It's just going to be me talking at you or with you. I'm going to start a new series where I literally just kind of share real quick, short, brief episodes of tips and tricks and things that I have learned using Ableton Live, from production to mixing to live performance to tools and hacks and different things to help you, hopefully help you step up some of your game with production in Ableton Live, which is by far the greatest music software in my mind. Anyway, today's tips and tricks episode is going to be focused more around production and producing. The first one I have for you is using Ableton Live 10's channel EQ. The channel EQ came with 10, and I'm really excited about the upgrade that they had with the high-pass filter. So if you drop a channel EQ on a track, you'll see in the bottom left corner, there's this little squiggle. It's a yellow button. If you click on that, that's a really quick way just to do a fast cutoff of any like super subs, which can be really great. Say if you have a boomy kick or your kick drum just sounds a little too muddy in the low end, just dropping a channel EQ on there and just turning that button on adds a nice high pass filter that kind of smooths off the low end, which can be nice for vocals too. So the channel EQ is a real nice, quick, fast way to do a quick EQ mix on a vocal as well. And then just having 3 quick knobs just for your low, mid, and high. Big fan of that channel EQ for really quick fixes of just EQing things if you don't want to get too surgical. And if so, then the EQ8 obviously is a great choice for that. The next tip I would have is spend some time playing with the multi-band dynamics audio effect. It's a compressor, and it's what you would call a multi-band compressor, but the OTT is a preset of the multi-band dynamics. So go into the audio effects, check out the OTT preset of the multi-band dynamics. I was in a Il Gates workshop, about 5 or 6 months ago, and he was a huge advocate of using this. A lot of people are. And really what it is if you just throw it on the track, it just really is kind of like a real intense compressor. OTT stands for over the top compression. And typically what I'll do is I'll just throw this on anything that really needs to cut through the mix. Say you have, like a lead pad or synth or something, and it just kind of needs to pop through the mix a little more. This can be a really fast way. Just throw it on the insert of the track. And then I'll use the dry wet knob in the bottom right hand corner of that device and just kind of pull back the dry wet mix and dial it into taste. It's a really fast way just to kind of brighten things. Typically what I'll do is I'll throw it on there, and then I'll just always overdo it with the dry wet and then back it off to taste. And then I'll do any kind of EQing afterwards and shaping it. And in the world of mixing, there really are no rules. I mean, if it sounds good, it sounds good. And that's kind of how I feel. So I can't say there's a one and done setting for any of these things. You just kind of have to go out and try them out yourself. But the OTT, it's a really good way to get instruments to cut through the mix, and it's a really great way just to kind of brighten stuff. Typically, if you throw it on there, it'll just make it really bright. Sometimes it can add kind of a weird fuzz or like a white noisy kind of hiss because it's compressing it so hard. So using that dry wet mix knob, really helpful. Pro tip for you. Another tip that I have for you is using a MIDI effect. It's called velocity. And when I'm producing, a lot of times I'll use a drum rack, and especially with the world of EDM or dance music, a lot of times I don't want the kick drum to be really quiet and then really loud. I want it to be pretty consistent. So rather than having to go through, oftentimes if you're just quickly producing, sometimes you have to go back and adjust the MIDI velocity of how hard some of the snare or kick drum or hi-hat or whatever is being played. Even if you are playing a keyboard or something and some of the notes are like really quiet or really loud, you can kind of control the velocity with the velocity MIDI effect. So if you just throw that in there, a lot of times I'll drag and drop that onto the insert of the cell in the drum rack, say like the kick drum. And then you can use different modes in the velocity MIDI effect, such as like fixed, which when you set it to fixed, the output high says that you can have that velocity only play at one fixed velocity. So that kick drum will always hit at like, say, 110. But then you also have clip mode, which you can adjust the low and the high. So you can set a range and saying, I don't want the snare to hit louder than this point, or I don't want the snare to hit lower than this point. So it's a really quick way just to kind of be able to control how loud or how quiet each note is being triggered for any MIDI instruments. And I love this thing. It's a really great way just to do that. So check that out. Another tip that I use for creating like a drop, say if you're really into bass music or like dubstep, or really, any genre of music that's electronic music where you have a lot of different sounds cutting in and out of each other. So, like you have a typical like dubstep drop, have like bow, bow, wow, wow, and like all this kind of stuff happening. So that was my best drop impression, in case you were wondering. But what I would do is I would create a instrument rack. And this is a really fast way to have sounds interchange. And if you create an instrument rack, and then you go into that instrument rack and you create multiple new chains. So if you just drop a new instrument rack on a track, you open up the chain view. If you right click, you can choose create chain. And when you do that, you can create multiple different chains. And then what you can do is you can drag and drop, say, serum or wavetable or operator, any instrument you want into those chains individually. And then when you have those different chains, what you could do is you can go into the chain view. So at the top, it says key velocity chain. And this is a way that you can basically tell this instrument rack when you want certain notes to be played for each chain. So long story short, you can basically create these different values where you have a chain being triggered by a specific range. So what I would do is I would go into the chain view, and you can say from 0 to 16 is going to be my serum patch, where I'm playing just a serum plugin of a crazy bass wobble, right? And then I could, on the second chain, make that range from like 16 to 30. And then that can just be my crazy synth sound from Omnisphere or a plugin like that. And then I can drop another plugin on the third chain, say like Ableton's wavetable, right? And then I can create that chain from like 32 to 40 or so. So basically you're just setting a range of when these drops are happening. And then what I would do is I would go in and just take a bunch of MIDI notes in a clip, right? So just create a blank clip for the track that this instrument rack is on. And I would just play out a bunch of different notes and kind of stretch them out. So maybe grab like 4 or 5 notes, just stretch them out pretty long. And then what you could do is in that chain view inside the instrument rack, now that you've drawn out those, say, 3 or 4 different values, you can just basically automate on the track. So if you open up and you say like an arrangement view, you open up the automation lane, then you can just drag the chain selector, which is going to say I'm going to go from that Serum plugin to that Omnisphere synth to that wavetable instrument, right? So you got 3 instruments in the instrument rack, and then you can just automate that chain selector to go back and forth between those 3 different plugins. It's a really fast, easy way just to make a drop have a ton of different variety, where there's those 3 sounds just jumping around between each other. And, honestly, some of this stuff might be kind of hard if you're newer to Ableton to really follow. And so if you are a little bit newer to Ableton, or maybe you want to go a little bit deeper than you already are, and you want to actually see like a visual representation of what I'm doing and what I'm talking about, I would definitely encourage you to join the Patreon that I just started for the podcast. It's only $5 a month, so it won't break your piggy bank. You will have access to a private Facebook group where I'll be doing live streaming each week, sharing these types of tips and tricks in my own projects. And it's a good way to support the podcast, to support me, and to learn a lot of cool stuff and grow and learn together, right? That's what it's all about. So you can just go to patreon.com/Ableton Live, and that is my Patreon channel. You'll have a link in the show note if you want to click on that and check that out. And you can end up asking me ongoing questions, and I would super appreciate it. Another tip for you guys is using the AutoPan. I am in love with this thing. The AutoPan is literally God's gift to mankind. I use this thing for shakers. I use it for special effects, panning left to right between the different speakers. I use it just to create a subtle variety of different things, tambourines, so that something doesn't just stay in the middle of the mix all the time and just kind of can be stagnant and boring. But the AutoPan is a great way just to kind of mix it up and add a little bit of flavor to what's going on. This can be a little overused. Like, I wouldn't make stuff crazy fast for a long period of time, because you can make people sound dizzy with headphones and they pass out, and it's not good. But I wouldn't use it. I would never use it for, say, like a lead bass instrument or a lead kick drum or snare. Mostly I use it for percussion, or for, like, say I chop up some vocal effect that's only happening for like 8 bars or so, and I'll just kind of have it slowly move from the left to the right speaker. So the AutoPan is a really fun way to do that kind of stuff. You can also use the AutoPan to make things pump, almost kind of like a side chaining effect. Really popular, say, in like house music, where you have the kick, it's just like dung, 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 like that 4 on the floor. And you could drop the AutoPan on a bass to make that bass really kind of pump around the kick drum, and just kind of say like that 4 on the floor pumping motion. You can use the AutoPan for that. And what I would do is I would just throw the AutoPan on a track, and to get that kind of pumping sound and motion, you can choose invert, which it has normal or invert. You can choose invert and then turn up the amount to 100%. And then you can set the rate, say, to quarter notes to make it have that kind of pumping motion, that feel. And then you want to pull the phase all the way down to 0. That way, it's no longer having the AutoPan make the amount of, say, that bass go to the left and right speaker, but now rather the phase is just causing the entire volume to cut in and out. And then I would turn up shape. If you want it to slowly go in and out, you could turn it up to, say, like 40% or something like that, so it's kind of a smooth cutting in and out. If you turn shape up to 100%, it's just going to literally cut in and out instantly. So kind of dial that in to taste. And yeah, pull the phase down to 0, set the rate, turn the amount all the way up. You can choose to invert it if you want to, based off the feel of how quickly it's pumping. And then you can you'll want to set the rate to beat mode. So right under the rate knob, you'll see that you can adjust it based off of however fast or slow you want it to be. So you can lock it into Ableton's BPM that way, make the bass pump in and out. It's just a fast way to do it, to have things kind of automate to cut in and out, and almost kind of side chaining pumping motion with the AutoPan. Another fun tip that I've started to use more recently is using the freeze function on Ableton Live's Reverb or Ableton Live's Delay audio effects. So if you go into Reverb, there's a little button that says freeze, and same thing on the delay. You can freeze the delay or the reverb tail as it's happening. So say I've got like a pad that I want to slowly have it fade into this big buildup before a drop or something like that. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll just solo that pad and I'll drop Ableton's reverb or delay on there, and I can just, at any point in time as it's playing, I'll set the dry wet knob to say like 50% or something, and then I'll just hit the freeze button. And what that's going to do is just going to cause that reverb or that delay tail just to continue to cycle and repeat over and over and over and over. And it can create like this really cool, long, spaced out, washed out effect. And then if you really want to take it to the next level, you could automate the dry wet knob on that reverb or delay to slowly turn up. And then if you are familiar with resampling, basically you just create a new audio track, and then the in and outputs of that new audio track, you would just select resampling for the input. And that just means when you arm that track, anything that Ableton is hearing is going to be recorded. So then what I'll do is I'll just record that freeze tail of the reverb or delay, and then I will just take that new audio track with just that frozen delay and reverb, and then I can just use that as like its own separate effect. And then I'll just go back to the original track with that reverb or delay on it and delete that reverb or delay so that the track, that pad, is back to normal the way it was sounding before. And then I have that new printed copy of just the tail of that reverb or delay. And then you can use that for anything you want. It's like special effect. You can chop it up, maybe put an auto filter on it, or really whatever you want to do. Sometimes if I'm really creative, I'll just want to go into that new resampled audio with just that new audio clip. And you can mess with the transposition and change the pitch of it inside the clip envelope. And you can make it kind of like go up or down. Say you can slowly build it up before a drop, and it creates like this like slowly like kind of sound. And it's kind of fun. Use that as an effect. So there really are no rules in the world of music production as far as I'm concerned. I think the more creative with this kind of stuff you get, the more fun you have, and the happier accidents that just kind of happen. So yeah, try playing with that, resampling, using the freeze function on Ableton Live's reverb or delay effects can be a really fun way to get creative. And last but not least, another one of my favorite tips is using Live's drum bus. So if you take Ableton's drum bus and you drop it on the kick drum, a lot of times it just really kind of makes that kick drum thump just a little bit harder. Adds a little bit of compression to it. You can choose crunch. It has a crunch knob, which a lot of times will make it a little bit brighter. Say if your kick sounds like too warm, you want it to cut a little bit more through the mix, you can turn up the crunch. A lot of times I notice that it's a little loud when I first drop it onto the kick drum. And so if you pull down the drive knob, that kind of balances it a little bit. Usually if I have my song and my kick already balanced with the rest of the tracks in the mix, I'll just like turn off the drum bus and then turn it on after I've played with it, and then just turn down the output fader just a little bit to kind of balance it back into the mix to make sure it was back to where it was before as far as the volume of that kick sitting with the rest of the tracks. But one thing I also like to do is turn on the compressor. So in the drum bus, down in the drive column, if you look down below, it says trim, and then there's a button that says comp, C-O-M-P for compressor. If you turn on that compressor, it's going to make it a lot louder. Like guaranteed, it's going to make it louder. So you're going to want to pull down the trim a little bit. I like to do that to kind of turn down the volume to kind of sit back into the mix and the volume. And then you've got soft, medium, and hard, and how hard that compressor and that drive is working. I typically, on a kick drum, like to leave it on soft because I don't want to over compress it, because if you're using samples, most likely, for your kick drums, those samples have already been compressed. And I really was in the habit when I first started producing for just over mixing and over affecting all of my samples. But you have to realize a lot of these samples, if you're using Loop Cloud or Splice, those samples have already been treated, right? So if you're over treating and over compressing and EQing and everything, sometimes you're actually just making them sound worse without realizing it. So I would just be really cautious when doing that. It's just Dan's tip of the day. So think about that as you're messing around and playing with these effects. But I find just a little bit of the drum bus with a little bit of drive, a little bit of crunch, and even if you turn up the transient, say to like 0.02 or 0.03, can add a little extra punch to that snare drum. I also like putting the drum bus on pianos. I think the drum bus on a piano can really make that piano cut through the mix a little bit better. It sounds a little more plucky and transient. So give that a try on the drum bus, or group all of your drums together in a big group, and then throw the drum bus on that group. Would make a lot of sense for this type of audio effect. Hopefully you guys enjoyed some of these tips. I hope you're able to follow them. I really encourage you to join the Patreon. It's only $5 a month. You'll get access to that private Facebook group I mentioned earlier, where I'll be doing live streams, sharing more tips and tricks. And you can join just by going to patreon.com/AbletonLive, or there will be a link in the show notes to this episode. Or if you would like to have a wealth of content and actual courses of different various subjects in Ableton Live focused on live performance or DJing, or how to use the APC-40, or how to use the Push 2, or maybe it's just intro to Ableton Live music production, I've got a ton of webinars and videos structured in there for you. And for $50 a month, you can access all of it. I'm basically just giving it away for free. So check that out. Black Friday discount code for this year, which ends on Saturday, November 30th. Save 25% on the membership by just using the discount code Black Friday. And you can get all that going to liveproducersonline.com. Click the fat green join button, and I would love to see you guys on the other side. Much love. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Really appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Also, hit me up if you have new tips and tricks, topics, ideas, new suggestions for new episodes on the podcast, or you just want to say hey. Go to Instagram @liveproducersonline is the handle. See you guys soon.